Good morning. Today, Pastor Peter Chin will share the message from the book of Genesis, chapter 37, verses 17 through 28. I will read in English, and Eleanor will read in Hindi. You can follow along on page 27 in the pew Bibles in front of you or on the screen above. Hear the word of the Lord. They have moved on from here, the man answered. I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. Here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we will see what comes of his dreams.
उस मनुष्य ने कहा, वो तो यहाँ से चले गए हैं और मैंने उनको ये कहते सुना कि आओ हम दोतान को चले। सो यूसुफ अपने भाइयों को पास चला और उन्हें दोतान में पाया। पर ज्यों ही उन्होंने उसे दूर से आते देखा तो उसके निकट आने के पहले ही उसे मार डालने की युक्ति की और वे आपस में कहने लगे, देखो वो सपन देखने वाला आ रहा है। सो आओ हम उसको घात करके किसी गड्ढे में डाल दें और ये कह देंगे कि कोई दुष्ट पशु उसको खा गया है। फिर हम देखेंगे कि उसके सपनों का क्या फल होगा।
When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. Let's not take his life, he said. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe that he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty. There was no water in it.
ये सुन के रोबेन ने उसको उनके हाथ से बचाने की मनसा कहा और हम उस प्राण को जो से तो ना मारें। फिर रोबेन ने उनसे कहा, लहू मत बहाओ, उसको जंगल के किसी गड्ढे में डाल दो और उस पर हाथ मत उठाओ। वो उसको उनके हाथ से छुड़ा के पिता के पास फिर पहुंचाना चाहता था। सो ऐसा हुआ कि जब यूसुफ अपने भाइयों के पास पहुंचा तब उन्होंने उसका रंग बिरंगा अंगरखा जिसे वो पहने हुए था उतार लिया और यूसुफ को उठाकर गड्ढे में डाल दिया। वो गड्ढा तो सूखा था और उसमें कुछ जल न था।
As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. His brothers agreed, so when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites who took him to Egypt.
तब वे रोटी खाने को बैठ गए और आंखें उठाकर क्या देखा कि इस्माइलियों का एक दल ऊँटों को सुंगध्रम, बलसान और गंधरस लादे हुए गिलाद से मिस्र को चला जा रहा है। तब यहूदा ने अपने भाइयों से कहा, अपने भाई को घात करने और उसका खून छिपाने से क्या लाभ होगा? आओ हम उसे इश्माइलियों के हाथ बेच डालें और अपना हाथ उस पर ना उठाएं, क्योंकि वो हमारा भाई और हमारी हड्डी और मांस है। सो उसके भाइयों ने उसकी बात मान ली। तब मिद्यानी व्यापारी उधर से आकर उनके पास पहुंचे। सो यूसुफ ने भाइयों को उस घड़े से खींच के बाहर निकाला और इस्माइलियों के हाथ चांदी के 20 टुकड़ों में बेच दिया और वे यूसुफ को मिस्र में ले गए। This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
So if you have been here for the last couple of weeks, you know that we've been doing a sermon series looking at family, and we've been using the story of Jacob and Joseph to help us to explore some of the issues and dynamics that we see in family. And not just to understand family, but we're trying to ask the question, how does our faith affect how we approach our family? How does believing in Jesus and being in the presence of God, how does that transform how we approach family situations? And so a couple of weeks ago, one of the things that we saw was that many of the family issues that we experience right now usually have a hand in the past. For example, in Jacob, there's a lot of favoritism, and that favoritism is really dangerous in his family, but it's not just his favoritism for his one son. He favored his wife that way, and that's why he favors his son. And he was raised and born in a family that favored him and didn't favor him. And so that one situation actually goes back in time, and it goes forward in time as well. And it was something for us to think about as well, to begin to explore, ask ourselves, how are some of the family dynamics and situations that we see, how are they actually connected to something that came before it? And how might they actually be influencing us in the future as well? And then last week we looked at love, and we said that love can be a wonderful thing, but it also can be a harmful thing at the same time. And Jacob is a great example of that Jacob loves his family, or some members of his family. And it's really clear. The Bible is poetic in its description of how much he loves his wife Rachel and his son Joseph and Benjamin. But through that love, he's actually harming other people. And sometimes we don't take the measure of that. We think, oh, when I love someone, everything comes out roses. But what Jacob teaches us is that we have to be more critical-minded about that. That through our love, without us even realizing it, we could be hurting that person, we could be hurting other people, or even ourselves at the same time. And it really calls us to be more critical-minded and sober about not just the fact that we love people, but how are we loving them? What's the effect of our love upon that person and maybe other people as well? But the beauty of these messages that we've gone through so far is when we bring the focus back to Jesus. Because although we have a lot of insight from Jacob, it's when we look at these stories through Jesus that we find hope, that we find redemption instead. For example, in that first sermon about favoritism, where this favored son creates bitterness and envy and even murder or a desire to murder, through Jesus, he's a favored son, but he uses his love and his favoritism to make us all favored. And so he gives us a different way to understand, a different way to live with our families. We don't have to elevate one person over the other. We use our belovedness to invite other people into belovedness. Our favoredness, Jesus' favoredness becomes ours. And so he gives us a different way to approach our families. Last week we saw how Jesus' love really counteracts many of the harmful loves that we've seen. For example, needy love. When someone loves someone passionately because they don't feel loved in their own lives. There's a vacuum or a need in their lives for love, and that's what drives them to love other people. And we may have seen that or felt that in our own lives, but with Jesus we find something very different. Because in John 13 and 15, what does he say? But as I have loved you, go and love other people. Not you are not loved and so go love other people, but you are loved. You are beloved. And out of that love, you can go and love other people. And so Jesus gives us this hope in our families, not just to understand our families, but to break free. Not from our families, but to break free from the bad things we do in our families, just to make that clear. Right? So the real hope came when we looked at these same situations, but we brought Jesus to bear upon them. I'm hoping that we'll discover the same exact thing today as well, as we address a question that I think many of us are asking as we go through this, and that question is this: but what do I do when I am trying to do the right thing, but my family isn't? You know, it's all well and good to feel inspired and to feel like, I feel convicted to love a different way, to forgive, or whatever it might be, and then you go home and you're this shining beacon of new life and a new conviction, but no one else is, and no one else is reciprocating, no one else is living that out. It's just you by yourself. And what do we do when that happens? When we might feel this conviction, we might feel like we want to be mature, we want to be Christ-like, but no one else is living that way. That the rest of our family is not living out that conviction, is not responding in the same way. They seem to be committed to being immature, to using their actions and their words in a way that continues to harm you or other people, or whatever it might be. What do we do when that happens? How do we press on? Well, I think I do want to start off by saying that everyone's situation is a little different. So if you've seen that, it's not all cookie cutter, right? What we're convicted to do right is different from other people. And so what I'm going to be saying here is not a prescription. It's not to say that everyone's situation is the same. Instead, I hope just to give us encouragement. An encouragement for whatever your context or your situation might be. And I think we do actually find some encouragement for us from the story of Jacob. And specifically from two individuals who are Reuben and Judah. If you know the story of Genesis 37, you know it's a story of a lot of people doing wrong things. that because of Jacob and his clear favoritism over one child, they want to kill that child. Not because of what the child has done, not because of Joseph's actions, but the father's actions. And so they all want to kill this brother, Joseph. Except for two brothers. There are two brothers who, when we read this passage, they don't want this to happen. And the first one is Reuben. And Reuben really stands out in this chapter as kind of this good man who's really fighting to do the right thing. And we read that in today's passage. They all want to kill their brother, but Reuben stands up first and foremost and says, don't do this. Let's not shed blood. Instead, just throw him into this cistern here. Let's punish him that way. But even that punishment is just an opportunity for him to come back and to save his brother's life. He is this beacon of morality. He's this beacon of good action in the midst of everyone doing the wrong thing. All of his brothers want to kill Joseph, but Reuben is conspiring to try to save his brother's life. He stands out here. Even later on, when the youngest brother, Benjamin, he needs to travel to Egypt to save another brother's life, Simeon, the father, Jacob, he doesn't want to do the right thing. He basically says, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to risk his son's life. He's being immature as he is throughout his entire life, and he refuses to let this happen. And so Reuben is kind of the mature one, again in the family, where he stands up and he says, you may put both of my sons to death if I do not bring him back to you. Entrust him to my care, and I will bring him back. And so when his own father, the mature one, the patriarch of the family, refuses to do what is right, Reuben does what is right. He will stand up and put his own family on the line and do the right thing in this situation. When everyone is doing wrong, Reuben is committed to doing what is right. And we find the same thing, although slightly different, with Judah. Judah is also this example of someone trying to do the right thing when others are doing wrong, but he's a little bit more of the middle child. He is the fourth child in this family, and so he's doing the compromise solution, right? Rather than the eldest child, this is what's right, play by the rules. He's trying to say, you're right and you're right too, the one that everyone doesn't like at the same time. And so his answer to this is he says, hey, we're not going to gain anything if we kill our brother. Let's sell him into slavery instead. So not the greatest answer, but he actually successfully gets them to not kill their brother. And so he's sold off into slavery. So not maybe the best thing you could do, but at the same time, he is this voice trying to change the brother's actions. And he does the same thing with Benjamin. When again, their father is being immature, does not want to redeem one of his own sons, it's Judah who says, I myself will guarantee his safety. You can hold me personally responsible for him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, I will bear the blame before you all my life. And so in this terrible story, these terrible chapters of betrayal and jealousy and attempted murder and all these different things, we have two sons who are standing up against us, who are doing the right thing when 10 others are not, when their own father and their own kind of moral compass is not willing to do the right thing. Reuben and Judah are trying to do the right thing. And I think this is a reminder and encouragement to us, to any of us who kind of feel like we're in this exact same situation. That with Reuben and Judah, we are reminded that even if our family is doing the wrong thing, we have to be committed to doing the right thing. That no, maybe the rest of your family hasn't changed, they haven't felt the same conviction, but that shouldn't change you. That like Reuben and Judah, we have to stand for what is right. We have to do the right thing, the honorable thing, the Christ-like thing whenever we can. In the same way that they do. That our names, our lives might be this moment where we find hope. And we say that, yeah, but one person is trying to be mature. They're trying to do the right thing here, and that we would be those people. Now, it's helpful to have models of that, but it's still not easy to do. It is not easy to do the right thing when the rest of our family doesn't seem to want to do that. And so maybe just a few other encouragements or reminders that will encourage us to stick to doing what is really honoring to God. And the first is that we need to do that even when no one else is, because we can't control the actions of other people, only our own. We can't control what our parents are going to do. We can't control what our children are going to do. We can't control what our spouse is going to do or our brothers and sisters. We have no control over those things. We can't reach into their lives and manipulate it and make them do what we think is right in those situations. The only person that we have any control over in those situations is ourselves. And so that's the only person that we can be responsible for. No, other people might not be doing that, but the one person that we can guarantee will do the right thing and the loving thing in this situation is ourselves. And so that's the person that we should make sure does what is right, because we can't control what anyone else does. Another reason we should do the right thing when our family is not is because doing the right thing now protects us from regret later. I think many of us know that when we're in conflict with our family, there is no refuge from it. Real conflict, not just, small piddling things, but things that really break your heart. It plagues you everywhere you go. And if you've experienced that, you go to work and you feel it, you go and hang out with your friends, but it's still kind of with you. There's very few refuges from that feeling when we're at odds with our family. But there is one that I think is really powerful. And that's if you do the right thing. If you do the right thing, everything else fails, right? Maybe they haven't responded, or they don't respond to the way that you want, or whatever it might be. But that one final refuge for you, that haven is, I tried my best. And maybe it's not everything that we want, but it's something. It's something to be able to go back into that situation and say, did I try my best? Was I careful with my words? Was I loving with my actions? And to legitimately be able to say, I did. I was. I think is a refuge in a situation where there are very few things that can give us that. So I think that's another reason we try to do the right thing. The last is that because doing the right thing isn't just about pleasing man, it's also about pleasing God. One of the reasons we try to do the right thing is to try to change our families, is to put them on a better course, to get better relationships, to change their minds about a situation. Surely that's one of the reasons. But that's not the only reason for us as believers. We don't do those things simply to please our family members. We do it to please God. We don't do the honorable thing just so that our family members will respond. We do those things to honor God. We have a whole other list of motivations as to why we do the right thing. Because as believers, we have another audience who's watching us, that we try to honor and that we try to please. And that is God Himself. And so we have to remember that. We're not just in it for our families. We're not just in it to change their hearts and minds. Hopefully, with the power of God, that will happen. But we have one more audience that we are doing this for. We are doing this so that God might be honored. And we shouldn't forget that. We shouldn't forget that our family is not the only people that we are trying to affect or we are doing this for. So I hope that for some of us who just feels like such a close and present situation, you do feel encouraged to do what is right, to remember to be like Reuben and to Judah, to control the actions that you can, and to do the right thing now to protect yourself later, and to honor God in your actions. And even right now, maybe just to take a moment for us to reflect on that. Just take a moment that if you are in that situation and you kind of feel this, you see this in your own life, what does it look like for you to persevere in doing what is right? Do you even just imagine, how can I continue to do the right thing here? And how can you be encouraged to continue to do so? How do you get strengthened and continue to be on that path? And just take a moment to reflect and to think about that situation for your life. Now, as important as it is for us to be encouraged in that situation, this is incomplete. Because there is something else we also have to confront, and that is the possibility, and really the probability, of the opposite as well. That there may very well be situations in your family's life where you have committed to doing the right thing, but no one else has, and then you have to continue to do so. But we also have to acknowledge that the opposite is true. That sometimes in our lives, it's not our families who are in the wrong, it's actually us, that we might be part of the problem. And strangely enough, we get the example and the model of this from the same exact people that we just talked about. Reuben and Judah, these moral men who over years have tried to do the right thing. What we will find in the exact same chapters in the book of Genesis is them doing the very wrong thing for their family. In Genesis 35, just a couple of chapters before where we are, we find Reuben, this incredibly moral person. We find him sneaking into his father's tents and actually sleeping with one of his father's concubines. Because of that, he drives a wedge between him and his father that will exist all the way until his father's died. Maybe in one moment he is right, standing up for a brother who's about to be killed, but in another moment he's doing something disgusting, despicable. And we find the same thing happen with Judah. Judah, this moral man, this compromise maker who's trying to do right by everybody, what we find is in Genesis 38, the very next chapter, sandwiched in between the two good things that he does, in Genesis 37 and Genesis 42, we find the story about Judah and Tamar, his daughter-in-law. We've talked about this before, so I don't want to go into too much detail, but he has a daughter-in-law named Tamar, and his responsibility is to care for her because she's lost her husband. It's because she's lost her husband, she has no way to live. So it's the father-in-law's responsibility, the patriarch's responsibility to make sure that she is provided for, to make sure that she has a husband so that she will not be in poverty and die in poverty. It's his responsibility. But essentially, in action, he just says, no, I don't want it. I don't want to risk any of my son's lives. I'm not going to do that. And so he just doesn't do it. So what Tamar does is she forces his hand in a very interesting way. She disguises herself so no one knows her, and she actually sleeps with her father-in-law, Judah, and becomes pregnant as a result. And then people call this out. They say, hey, your daughter-in-law, Tamar, is now pregnant, but she's not married to anybody. And Judah gets in a fit. He has a fit, and he says, she needs to be brought out here, and she needs to be punished. And so Tamar comes out, and she says, the man who got me pregnant is the one who owns these things, and shows Judah his own stuff that she took from him as a pledge. And he realizes he's the one who did this. This is in Genesis chapter 38. This is one chapter after we find Judah advocating for his brother, and just a couple of chapters before he'll advocate for Benjamin as well. And I think this is a reminder to all of us. A reminder to all of us that with Reuben and Judah, we are also reminded that sometimes it is not our families who are in the wrong, it's actually us. And we hate that. We hate playing that role. We love the other role, and we take it up very easily, myself included, where we identify immediately when we're the right ones and our family's in the wrong. We know every single situation for the last 30 years of our life where that has happened. But this situation is invisible to us often. We often just don't even see it. And sometimes we imagine that it doesn't exist. That, no, I'm always the one who's doing right. I'm always the one who's trying to be mature. And how many times have we actually said that to ourselves, or maybe even in front of our families? Why am I always the one who's doing this? Why isn't my brother doing this for my dad, or whatever the case might be? We see this so clearly. But Reuben and Judah forces us to recognize that the same people who are right and doing the right thing can also be doing the wrong thing, and that includes ourselves. And in those situations, doing the right thing is very different. And we see that from Judah. Judah, when he's confronted, when he's given this revelation that he is the one who got his own daughter-in-law pregnant, that he is the one who has not been caring for his daughter-in-law in the way that he should have. He recognized these things that Tamar showed and immediately said, she is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son, Shelah. He says it right there. I'm wrong. I'm not the righteous one. She's right. You're right. I'm wrong. He acknowledges that he's wrong, and he makes things right instead. What's so interesting is that the child that comes from this union will actually be one of the ancestors of Jesus. Jesus' genealogy will come out of Judah and Tamar. God's not afraid of our dirty laundry. He's really not. He's not afraid of our family's dirty laundry. In fact, it's part of his story. And I think this is a reminder to us to acknowledge the possibility that, yes, you 99% of the time may be the one who is right, but there is still that 1%. There is still that 1%, that one time that you might actually be Reuben. you might actually be Judah, the one who is right, but also the one who is wrong. Doing the right thing in our families, then, is not just about standing our ground when we are right. It is also being prepared to acknowledge when we are wrong and then working to make things right. That's hard to hear, but I'm telling you right now, I am preaching to myself more than any of you. That is a mirror that I need to look at every single morning. And it's not just something that I say as a pastor to people who are less good at this than myself. This is a challenge to myself as well. But it's one that we have to ask. So let's do that for just a moment. Is there a situation in your family where honestly you're part of the problem? Your attitude, your actions, your words, you're not helping. You're not helping. And what does it mean to do the right thing then? To acknowledge that and say, you know what? I am part of this problem. And this is what it means to be part of the answer instead. To be like Reuben and Judah, the opposite side. Not the time we're doing good, but when we acknowledge, I am less righteous than you. You have been doing the right thing. I need to change. Because this is also what it means to live in families as well. Oh, geez, this story of Jacob just is like a can opener to our families. It really is. It just light floods in, painful light floods into our family when we look at the story of Jacob. And I've seen that over and over. You think this is easy for me to preach. I preach all sermons to myself as well. And so it has been hard, but good to see these things, to unearth them. But what we've seen over and over is that shouldn't be the end of the conversation because we find hope with Jesus. We shouldn't end with just insight. We shouldn't just end and say, oh, that's interesting. Interesting is not the point of the Christian life. The point of why we follow after Jesus is for hope and for redemption and restoration. So how do we find that with Jesus? Again, bringing the lens back to Jesus, how does Jesus transform this insight that we might have about doing the wrong thing when other people are doing the right thing when other people are doing the wrong thing? And then when we've done the wrong thing, stopping and making things right. Because that's what we've just heard about our families and how we need to approach our families. What does it mean when we think about Jesus? Well, when I think about that, when I think about doing the right thing even when people are doing the wrong thing, when I think about stopping and acknowledging my guilt and making things right through forgiveness, I think about the Sermon on the Mount, because that's exactly what Jesus teaches. The Sermon on the Mount is this foundational teaching that Jesus gives about discipleship. This is what disciples do when they follow after me. This is what it means for God to reign in the world and in the heart. This is what it looks like. That's the Sermon on the Mount. And so this is what he teaches about doing the right thing when other people are doing the wrong thing. You have heard that it was said, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. This person did me wrong, I'm going to do them wrong. They were a jerk to me, I'm not going to call them. But I tell you, don't resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, they're doing the wrong thing. Turn to them the other cheek also. Do the right thing. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. And so this principle that informs our families about needing to do the right thing, even when 99% of the people are doing the wrong thing, is what Jesus teaches us about discipleship, about following him after him. Or even when it comes to changing our path when we have done wrong. Again, from Matthew chapter 5, Sermon on the Mount. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift. Don't take a step further. Go back, be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift. It sounds like Judah, where he realizes, I've done something wrong, and there's no pause or there's no justification. He says, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. And he makes things right with his daughter-in-law. Or Matthew chapter 7, how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. First, take the plank out of your own eye. Then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. He says the same thing we just talked about. This potent family insight about, hey, if you're the wrong person in your family, get it together first. Make it right first is what Jesus teaches us about discipleship. And I think that gives us an idea or an insight that I think we may often forget about our families, which is this. The life and teachings of Jesus are not just instructions on how to live in the world, but also instructions on how to live in our families. We suffer from something which I would say is a division or a compartmentalization between principles of faith and principles of family. I don't know if anyone else kind of sees this or perceives this in their life, but when it comes to living in the world, living with coworkers, living, in public, we want to be guided by Jesus. We want to be like Jesus. We take his actions and his words and his teachings. We want to live like a disciple in those places, and we find that powerful, informative to have the ministry of Jesus as a model for us as we go into our schools. As we go into our neighborhoods, as we go into our workplaces, how can I be and sound and act like Jesus in those places? But it's a curious thing that sometimes we go into our homes and that no longer becomes our operating principle. We go into our homes, we interact with our spouses, with our parents, and with our children, and no longer does the ministry of Jesus become the primary lens or the way that we interact with those people. Instead, it becomes the world. Instead, we say, man, my spouse is so annoying, I'm not going to talk to them. Or I'm going to give them the cold shoulder because they are being annoying. They're doing something wrong, and so I need to do something wrong back to them. My child's being annoying, and so I need to punish them so that they can learn what's going on. And so suddenly, in our lives, we put this wall around it. Everything else is guided by the ministry of Jesus, a discipleship, being like Christ, but sometimes we enter into our family's life and we wall it off. Discipleship becomes something about all of our lives except when we go home. Except when we go home. And we realize here what Jesus is doing. Jesus is challenging us to bring discipleship to bear to our family's life. That we would be just as much disciples when we are interacting with our spouses, that our spouse would see Jesus through us. Amen. Our children would see Jesus through us, not just an earthly father, an earthly mother, they would see Christ. And instead of compartmentalizing and saying, no, the Sermon on the Mount doesn't apply when I go through my front door, to say, no, it applies just as much there. It's just as much of a family principle as it is a neighborhood principle and a justice principle and a conference principle and a social media principle. And it belongs just as much in that context as anywhere else. Jesus integrates our life. He makes our discipleship about everywhere our feet are. Every place that we go is a place to be Jesus. We read this in Ephesians chapter 3. For this reason I kneel before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and earth derives its name. And then I pray that out of his glorious riches he may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. This is a famous benediction that we often hear that Paul gives. But I just want to point out the very first part of it, where he says, for this reason I kneel before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth derives its name. Integration. Our family life is not separated from our faith life. Discipleship is not something that happens everywhere except in the home. These things apply everywhere that we go. Everywhere that we are is where our faith goes, where Jesus is being represented. And that includes our families as well. I'm going to ask the worship team to come forward at this time if they could. But to give us another moment to think about a third question, which is this. Think again about your families, about your relationships, about your situations, dynamics. And think about this. What does it look like to pull the walls down from your family? Where no longer do we say, oh, my family is led by these instructions, but the rest of my life is Jesus. To say, no, my family is just as much a place for discipleship and Christ-likeness as every other place. What does it mean for you to live out the teachings of Jesus in your family? What does it look like to act like Jesus? That hits harder than I thought. I typed it, but it's harder when you think about it. What does it look like to act like Jesus in your family? How can you invite Jesus to always be a member and a part of your family's life? The last few weeks, I've noticed that at the end of the sermon, it's very quiet. And I've wondered, is it just that I'm not doing a good job or whatever? And I've talked to a few people, and they've said, it's such hard work. It's such hard work. And so I don't expect you to say amen or to do anything. I just want you to allow the Spirit to be with you as you think about these things. The worship team is just going to sing a song of reflection for us, just to give us space and to ask hard questions. You can be in the seat, you can sing with them if you want to come up and kneel at the altar, but just to give this space to let the Spirit begin to penetrate, to go over the walls that we built into our families, and begin to see ourselves as a reflection of Christ wherever we might go. It's hard. As you can see, I've struggled with this just as much as anybody else does. So I just want to give you that freedom to let the Spirit speak through this song or whatever it is, and to let Jesus begin to be at the center of all parts of our lives. Why don't we do that together for a moment?
We try, we fail, do too little, too late. We wish we could walk away. We hurt, we're hurt, nothing seems to work. We don't know what to say. Forgive us, forgive us. We know not what we do. Be with us, be with us. We don't know what to do. What's wrong, what's right, hard to see without sight, and blindly we come to you. Forgive us, forgive us, we know not what we do. Be with us, be with us, we know what to do. We don't know how to pray here, stay here. All we hope that is you're here and help us seek justice, love, mercy, walk humbly. Lord, help us
God, we just invite you into all the parts of our lives, God. To the broken places, Lord, that are so painful to look at. We especially invite you there. And we especially invite you into our families, God. For those of us who want to do the right thing and our families just won't respond, they won't change, strengthen us. Strengthen us that we might honor you. Not just our families, but we might honor you in doing what is right. For those of us who are doing wrong, give us the courage to stop and to ask for forgiveness and to make things right. And remembering that you call us to that because you are faithful and just, and you will forgive us of all unrighteousness. And for all of us, help us to no longer wall off our families from you and to assume that we can live as if you are not the center of that orbit, God. Help us, Lord, to put you there, to be Christ everywhere that we go. That every face, no matter the age, no matter what they've done to us, might see you. Help us, Jesus, to do this. Help us, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.